So how does a band sell 75 million records, become literally the biggest act on the entire planet, and then just walk away at the peak of their powers? Well, that's the story of The Police. It's a story about three clashing geniuses who created a sound that completely defined an era. And their creative fire, it was so intense, it was always destined to burn out. Today, we're going to dig into the combustible chemistry that fueled their insane rise and pretty much guaranteed their epic collapse. I mean, just look at that number. In only 6 years, this power trio sold over 75 million records. It's staggering. But here's the thing. The story behind that success wasn't one of harmony and brotherhood. Not even close. Now, it was a story fueled by a chemistry that was so volatile, so intensely creative and competitive that it basically acted like rocket fuel. It just launched them straight into the stratosphere. But you know what happens with rocket fuel, right? It burns out. And that explosion was inevitable. This is the story of how that combustible energy built a musical empire and why it ultimately guaranteed its own spectacular destruction. Okay, so to really get this, we have to start at the very beginning. You have to ask yourself, how did three virtuoso musicians who were completely out of step with the whole punk scene they came from become one of the biggest bands in the world? And why on earth did they implode right when they were at the top of their game? Just look at this contrast. It says everything. On one side, you have the London punk scene in 1977. It's all about raw energy, being minimalist, and being proud of being an amateur. Then, you've got the Police. A drummer who grew up in the Middle East, a jazz fusion bassist, and a guitarist a whole decade older than his peers. They were the total opposite of punk. But, and this is the genius part, they used its energy. They even bleached their hair for a chewing gum commercial just to fit in. They used punk as a Trojan horse to deliver their complex, super sophisticated sound to the masses. And that sound was built on a triad of really unique and, often conflicting musical styles. Each one of them brought this incredibly specialized vision to the table, and together it created a sonic blueprint that was unlike anything else out there. First up, you have the architect, the engine of the band, Stewart Copeland. His drumming was the entire foundation. See, instead of a simple rock beat, he used polyrhythms, that's playing multiple rhythms at once, something he picked up during his childhood in the Middle East. He also brought in this reggae one-drop feel, hitting the third beat instead of the usual 2 and 4. That created this amazing sense of space in the music. And then he filled that space with splash cymbals, special tuned drums, and digital delay. It was just this hyperkinetic, precise, and totally revolutionary sound. So while Copeland was building the architecture, Andy Summers was the painter. He wasn't playing big, chunky rock riffs. No way. He was creating these atmospheric textures. He used these sophisticated jazz chords, like suspended chords and add nines, that gave the music this ethereal, shimmering quality. He was a master of effects, especially that electric mistress pedal, which became his signature. He literally painted these huge, cavernous soundscapes that made a little three-piece band sound like an entire orchestra. And finally, holding it all together, you have the storyteller, Sting. He was the main songwriter, so he gave the band its narrative and its conceptual heart. His bass playing was actually deceptively simple. It was inspired by dub reggae, and he did that on purpose to leave all that room for Copeland and Summers to go wild. But it was his lyrics that really set them apart. I mean, this is a guy referencing Nabokov in Don't Stand So Close to Me and Carl Jung for the title of their biggest album. This intellectual streak is what gave the Police their whole thinking person's heartthrob reputation. Okay, so you've got these three clashing, brilliant elements all mashed together. But how does that actually translate into hit records and selling out stadiums? Well, let's take a look at their absolutely meteoric rise to the top of the world. This chart right here, this tells the whole story. Just look at that curve. They start strong, their first 2 albums go platinum in the US, then with Zenyatta Mandata, boom, they crack the top 5. Ghost in the Machine hits number 2, and then Synchronicity in 1983, it was a monster. It hits number 1, stays there for 17 weeks, and sells 8 million copies. It famously knocked Michael Jackson's Thriller off the top spot. Think about that. It was just an unbelievable, meteoric rise. They were basically leading the charge of what everyone was calling the second British invasion. And their secret weapon? It was this brand new cable channel called MTV. Their music videos were so visually striking, and MTV had them in constant rotation. It turned them from a popular band into global, household name superstars, and it felt like it happened overnight. And that all brings us to one single night. August 18th, 1983. The Police are playing Shea Stadium in New York. The crowd is almost 70,000 people. That's even bigger than the Beatles crowd at the same place. And right in that moment, Sting has this epiphany. He realizes they've done it. They've reached the absolute summit. They've climbed Everest. And the only place to go from the top of the world is down. That feeling, that realization, really marked the beginning of the end. Because the very same chemistry that made them so brilliant was also, without a doubt, a ticking time bomb. This right here is the central paradox of the Police, laid out perfectly. On the one hand, their creative fuel was this clash of three totally uncompromising visions. That's what made the magic. But on the other hand, that exact same clash became the reason they fell apart. The friction that created Diamonds eventually just ground everything to a halt. Everybody called this dynamic their combustible energy. And for a while, it was their secret weapon. But it was just completely unsustainable. I mean, by the time they were recording Synchronicity, the fighting was so bad that the producer, Hugh Padgham, made them record their parts in separate rooms, just to keep them from physically and verbally attacking each other. You know, the end didn't come with a big bang. It was more of a whimper. After that massive tour ended in '84, they went on a break. They tried to get back together in 1986, but all the old arguments just flared up instantly. Then, in this almost darkly funny twist of fate, Stewart Copeland falls off a horse playing polo and breaks his collarbone. He can't drum. And that was it. The sessions were just abandoned. And the Police were, for all intents and purposes, finished. But of course, the story doesn't end there. Even decades later, the two things that always defined the Police, massive, massive financial success and intense personal friction, they just continue to echo. So in 2007, they get back together for a reunion world tour, and the public was hungry for it. I mean, the tour grossed a staggering $360 million. That year, they were the highest-earning musicians on the planet. But even with hundreds of millions of dollars on the table, guess what? The old tensions were still there. No new music got made. Sting later admitted he kind of regretted the tour, calling it emotionally taxing. And Copeland confirmed it. He said the creative friction in the rehearsal room was just as poisonous as it had been back in the '80s. And the conflict still didn't end there. Fast forward all the way to 2025, and a lawsuit gets filed. This time, it's Summers and Copeland suing Sting, and they're seeking over $2 million in unpaid royalties. This lawsuit, it just crystallizes their entire history. On one side, you have Summers and Copeland saying, hey, our arrangements were essential to these songs. We deserve more credit and more money. And a huge point of contention is that iconic guitar riff for Every Breath You Take. Then on the other side, you've got Sting's lawyers firing back, saying a deal in 2016 settled all this. So here we are, 40 years later, and it is still about money and credit. Which really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? The story of the Police is this perfect case study of brilliant, difficult people creating truly timeless art. But it really makes you wonder, is great art worth the human cost? Is that conflict a necessary ingredient for genius, or is it just the unfortunate byproduct? It's something to think about.